Now, let me say something about data, and something, in fact, we may, we'll do this, and then we'll probably move down to the data part so that we can get into that a little bit more specifically. I talked about this identifying factors, and this table I liked from Chris Barrett and some of his colleagues at Cornell worked on this, but it's probably one way you can think about some of the ways in which you might want to take that first analytical problem of understanding the factors and so forth, and getting somewhere on it. And that is, you look at, we can look at situations in which resilience, you would expect to be there because essentially well-being is well supported in many ways. Or, and that is the rows, or it's not, okay? So you can take the no being places like Congo, like Kinshasa, like Haiti, the yes being places like many parts of Ghana, for example, that are much better off. And then you can look at resilient outcomes, resilient or non-resilient. And by looking at how individuals, communities assort into those 4 cells, you can actually plan studies around those. And I'll just, you have the paper actually in your package that has more detail on that. And I think it's this paper that's been in the back of the room, right? So I'll just talk about positive deviance because I think it's one that I happen to like a lot. But it's the one we talked about where in communities, where there are many absent resilience factors, somehow households and communities manage to be, or communities manage to be resilient. And so positive deviance analysis entails looking for those situations, looking for that quadrant of the 2x2 table, and then trying to analyze why those communities are resilient, okay? Why are they resilient in the absence of many of the dimensions of resilience in their circumstances, right? But there are others, and I'm not going to go through all of those, but they're well laid out in the table and in the paper. Now, one example also that you have from in a paper that was provided to you, and I found a better one, and I tried to open it up this morning because it's actually much more clear and simple to look at, is the Alanovi approach. The Haiti work was based on the Alanovi approach. It was based on, in a sense, the livelihood framework with some additions that we thought were important. But these are, empirically based approaches based on relatively large data sets. And here, the notion is that these dimensions of resilience, which they, in this particular article, pull out to 6 dimensions with several indicators in each. They went through a number of different analytical steps to identify these particular dimensions. But you can take any of these boxes, and there will be several questions that actually attempt to measure these constructs, assets, income and food access, access to basic services, and so forth. So this is the FAO Resilience Framework, which, when you actually look at the methodology, it's quite similar to ours in terms of the dimensions. Ours are somewhat different simply because, as we said, the dimensions are contextual to a certain degree. It'd be interesting to see, in the case of the RAN study populations, how different they're going to be, right? How different are these dimensions going to come out in your assessments? Now, something else I'm not going to go over here, but it's just that the different, we've talked about it already, but there are different research traditions, and they entail the use of different types of approaches. And it's a combination of research tradition and what you're studying, right? But where we're ending up is mixed methods approaches and capturing real-time data. at the far end of the table in terms of where we think the resilience literature is moving in that sense.